Okay. Yeah, I guess with that, we'll start. Thank you all for coming. Yeah, so this is a NUI, or I guess UI, just kind of intro event. Goal of it being to kind of show you guys just the very raw basics of, kind of UI interface, specifically kind of web, which is what RedM and kind of 5M uses. So specifically HTML, CSS, some JavaScript, and a tiny bit of Lua, just kind of for the NUI interactions. And of course, we have our chat for this channel. So if you go like where it says Community Dev #1, there's a little chat icon that says Open Chat. You can feel free to open that, ask any questions along the way. If you have any, directions you want, something like that, feel free to ask. I have not been able to put together too good of a lesson plan. So we're just gonna go with the flow, and yeah, like I said, if you have any questions, just ask away. So to start, I guess we'll start at the basics. UI, like I said, it's web-based framework is really what it is, and web-based meaning like your browser. So what NUI is, or what it is in RedM, is it's technically a browser over your game, and so that's how you can do these interfaces and these different really cool mini games and kind of different things. They get very complicated and in depth. So knowing that, that's kind of where this all comes into play. We use HTML, CSS. This is all stuff that websites use. And so to start off, is kind of HTML is kind of the core of it. HTML is the templating. It's the technically it stands for hypertext markup language. Kind of in depth. What that really just means is, like I said, it's kind of the template. It's telling the browser what to display. So, for example, like this is what HTML looks like. I wish I had So this is what HTML looks like. So I'll show you. So you can see, if I like hello, refresh, here's hello. So like I said, it's kind of a template. We'll get a little more in depth. Can I use the UI to escape the fact that it's 102 already here? Jeez, 102, that is rough. It is a nice 76 degrees Fahrenheit here. So I can't complain. There you go. Is that a little better there, Cam? Perfect. Okay, so sorry, I might be a little all over the place. I do not generally teach people, so this is this is new for me. So HTML. So kind of start from the top. The way that it's kind of formatted, you'll see here. There's this head, body, footer. This is the raw base of HTML, and what it really means is kind of like, if you think of it like a body, a whole web page is a body. You have your header, which is kind of like it's where you import things. These actually should be in there. Whatever. It's where you bring things in. So say you want styles. If this is what was a website, it's where you'd have your, you'd have your description and title. So what's showing up here, where it's like txadmin 0. Your title would go here. Your body, so kind of like your body. If you're human, has your heart and all your organs, and that's kind of what this is of the website. This is where all your meat and potatoes are. This is where the content is. As you can see, it has hello. You can keep typing. And it's kind of what that is. Footer is also kind of content, but what that really is it's kind of generic. This is kind of a weird one. Footer, honestly, you don't have to worry about. I'll explain it just so you know what it is, but it's kind of like body, but instead it's literally just the footer. Footer in websites are these little things here. That's kind of the lingo for it, or the term. So for the R use case, I'm going to remove it because we genuinely don't need it. So that's kind of what those are. And you'll see a lot of these kind of like open and closed, what we call tags. I guess they'd be like your greater than or less than, symbols. So what these are called are tags. And so what you have here is your opening tag, and then you have this little slash here, which means it's your closing tag. And you kind of think of it like if you've ever done Lua or anything like that, you have your if statement, and then you have your end, which kind of tells you, hey, I'm done with this if statement. Same concept. It's kind of saying, hey, I'm going to start this body. Everything in here is part of this body. And this is telling, this HTML, hey, now I'm done with this body. Anything outside of it, done. So you kind of see it all over. It's kind of a core like HTML lingo. So it's kind of, core layout. So that being said, those are kind of like the very broad, use it once, really. So you have it here for each page, or in our case, we're only having one page kind of doing everything. And so that's kind of like the template of your page. And then you have other tags, which you can kind of see here, right? We have a div, we have a link, there's a script. And they all kind of mean different things, and what it's doing is just telling HTML or the browser, hey, I want you to treat this, text or this whatever I'm feeding it, I want you to treat it a certain way. So for example, here we're saying, hey, this is a link tag, and it's going to be a CSS style sheet, so it's going to be our styling, and it's going to pull it from this file. So that's kind of what a link is, or like what. And so you have other ones, right? So div. What a div's doing, right, is it's kind of a free placeholder element. You can use divs kind of freely. I use divs, for pretty much everything. Not everything, obviously, but any kind of. So eventually, right, you can kind of get into styling, which we'll get into, where you can color things. So imagine this kind of has a box around it. And so say, hey, I wanted another one, I might add, another div here, and now there's two, right? So that's kind of that. So here's another, tag example we can walk through. So there's a script, and what this is saying is, pull in any JavaScript or any script that you may have, and the source, so what file is from, is going to be from vendor, Vue.js, or app.js. And what those are doing is they're pulling in this JavaScript and running it. Yeah. So let's see. So yeah, like divs, there's some other ones. So another one that's kind of like a div, but it doesn't hold attributes the same. So these are for like, say you're like, hello, this is some awesome text, and you wanted to style just awesome. In that case, you wouldn't use a div, you would use a span. And the reason being is spans stay inline, meaning, so you'll see here, right, how this went, it like did the top one and then it stacked it immediately below. Well, with a span, it's actually kind of different. It doesn't stack it. Instead, it keeps it inline, meaning it's in the same line. So that's kind of when you'd want to use a span versus a div. See? Stays in line, and technically you could then... So now you might be like, okay, how do I style this? Or how do I identify this? And so there's two ways to really identify things. You can already see here there's one. And to identify things in your HTML, use IDs or classes. An ID is kind of inherent. It's an identifier. And in HTML, that means you have one thing that you're going to identify with this ID. A class, on the other hand, is similar. It's an identifier, but it's an identifier for a group of tags. So anything that repeats, so say I wanted this text again here, and I want to get both of these spans, but I don't want to get this third one. I just want these two spans. So I wouldn't use an ID because there's two of them that I want. So I'd use a class. And then I could be like class, awesome. You could add it to both. So that's classes and IDs. These will become much more useful later in CSS and JavaScript. For now, they're kind of useless, but again, once we get into CSS and want a style, these will become very important. Along with that, there's some other like very basic, tagging attributes, or tags, I mean. So for example, if you want a button, there's a button tag. And it has a click, and you can type in, whatever you want when the button's clicked. It can trigger JavaScript. That's pretty much it. Usually it triggers JavaScript or PHP, I guess, if you're into that, I guess. But so there's buttons, there's paragraphs, which are these Ps, which are basically like basic text with a little bit of styling it'll add for you. So here's kind of like basic text, just as is. Ps to kind of be a little more exact, I guess. So if you really want to be like, hey, this is a paragraph of text, you could add that in. And kind of like a div, it'll stack things. Right, so stack it below it. Again, it's very similar to a div. It's kind of more syntaxually just what the docs and all that recommend. Doesn't have to be used, as you see here, for text, but can be easier for you depending. And that being said, there's a bunch of others. This is how we do, for example, Vorp inputs. There's an input tag, and you can do the type of it being, text or number. And then that also has its associate. So like a button has a click. This kind of has its similar. You type stuff in, and there's a way to kind of link it through HTML and JavaScript. So this link, which I keep going back to, W3 schools. When you get more advanced, it's not as useful, but it's a very, very useful website for learning UI and kind of just the basics of just true raw HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And it's a really good reference tool. So for me, for example, there's so much here. It's impossible to, not here, but like in the world of HTML and CSS and all that, it's truly impossible to remember everything. So coming here, it's very nice. You can go through and be like, oh, okay, how did a canvas work again? And it'll kind of go through. It'll explain everything. And usually, like here, it'll give you examples. So you can go here and go, okay, I want a button that I just talked about, right? Well, here you go. Here's a button. You can click try it, and here you go. Showing you how to do it with a little bit of raw JavaScript built in. And yeah, it does that for all of this kind of stuff. So if you wanted, like, let's say input, right? Try it. So here you go. There you go. So yeah, W3 schools, which I have in this kind of document, which I'll link in the video. It's very, very helpful, especially these little try editors and all that. It's really lets you kind of check it out, try it without getting too in depth. And then I don't know if you noticed here, but you can also go in and edit. So say you want to come here and just play around and start messing around with HTML and CSS. Well, you click run, and there you go. It changed. So that is a great, powerful tool to learn with. That is something I've used, for at least 10 years, So when I first started learning, how to program and do all this, this is a key tool to teaching me this stuff that I know now. Okay, so that's kind of the basic HTML overview. I know I went pretty quick there. I don't know if you guys have any questions or anything about HTML itself yet. I know it's pretty early on, so if not, no worries. But if you do, feel free to type them in chat. And if not, then I will move on to CSS. Drink some water. Hold on. Okay, so it looks like we're good, and then let's move on to CSS. So just to recap, right, in the HTML, we're calling in our CSS via this tag here. Link rel, was just saying, what is the relation of this link? It's kind of a weird way of saying it, but it's just saying, what type of link is this? Because technically you could use this to import images if you wanted, or I don't know, there's just a bunch of other stuff I wouldn't quite worry about quite yet. But yeah, so this is saying it's a style sheet, meaning it's CSS. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. So again, that's why style sheet is the name of it. And then this is the file we're importing. So here you'll see there's an empty CSS file that we can now use. Sorry. So let's now use it. Let's color these classes we made. So in CSS is really where you're going to start using these IDs and classes, and there's certain ways you reference them in CSS, and I will show you now. So if I want to reference that class, a class is denoted with a dot and then the class name. So I want awesome. And then to do it, it's like JavaScript, which you'll see as well. We use curly braces, what these are called, but they're just, I don't know what their technical name is, to be honest. Mustache, yeah, mustache. So that's kind of like the equivalent of like in Lua, if you were to say like function whatever, and then, well, actually no, a better way of saying that would be like, if whatever, then end. So then and end are kind of like the open curly brace is then, this closed one is end, if that makes sense. Oh, curly brackets. Yeah, so yeah, that's another way to reference it. Yeah, curly brackets, that'd be the way. So awesome. So let's then do, so there's all kinds of CSS attributes, which again, this kind of goes over as well, this site. So let's see here, right? So you can do fonts, alignment, lists, colors, all kinds of stuff. So this is really where you get to be like creative. This is kind of the creative side of UI. And so for example, if we want to change the color of this, we go color, and then you could do either hex codes, which is like a 6-digit computer code for colors. You can also use RGBA or RGB, which is red, green, blue. Or browsers have built-in colors. So you can kind of see there's, red, there's I think light blue is one, I think. Yeah, light blue, coral, all these. So these are all default in browser. colors that you can use, or you can do this, which is like hex. This is what it's called, hexadecimal color code. And the cool thing with VS Code, which is another reason I highly recommend this, is you get this like fancy tool here where when you put in hex or any color, it gives you a little color picker. So you can literally go through and it will yeah, so here you go, RGB. And if you wanted this to be hex, you just click it and it'll switch between all the different modes. So yeah, you can do HSL, HWB, but really people just stick with kind of RGB or hex. Those are kind of the two real ones. Haha. Do I prefer VSC over Visual Studio? So it depends what I'm developing. For web development specifically, I would highly recommend Visual Studio Code over Visual Studio. Just kind of depends what you're doing. The other one's more in depth. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so the other one's to build more in-depth tooling and stuff. So like, if you were to use a language like C, C++, C#, really any of the C-based languages, then you'd kind of want to go more with that Visual Studio. If you're doing like web development, so JavaScript, Node, CSS, HTML, then you do Visual Studio Code more. Yes, right. So if you're doing C# and SQL, Visual Studio would kind of... You could use Visual Studio Code. You're going to have a lot rougher of a time as it's not... Yeah. So that's what I was going to say. You can technically set it up nowadays. A long time ago, it wasn't like this. Now you can technically set builds and all that, but they're not default, and you have to go like find them. Versus Visual Studio, like 2022 and all that, they kind of like auto detect a lot of the build stuff for you, and it'll it's just a lot easier when you have to build something like in that kind of way. That being said, front end development like Vue and React and all these different ones, they also do build tools, but it's a different kind of build tool than what C# and C++ and all of those use. So it's something where like with those kind of builds, you'd still use VSC, you'd still use Visual Studio Code. But yeah. Yeah, no worries. But yeah, so here we go. So we got our class of awesome and our color of whatever this kind of tealish green color. I don't know what you want to call it. And let's see. Boom. Now our two awesome texts are colored with that. And you'll see our test over here, this one, is not colored because it was not tagged with that class. And in fact, if you wanted to have it be something else, you could. So I could be like, test, I want this to be orange. Boom, now it's orange. So there's other attributes like this. So another one, for example, would be background color. So let's say we might want a black background. Oops, sorry. So CSS, sorry, I kind of should explain. So the way that it works with these attributes, if you haven't already kind of picked up on it, is it's kind of a key value. So what you're saying here is I want the color. You have your colon, semicolon, whatever, one of them, and colon, and then your value, and then your semicolon, kind of like this closing bracket or end, is telling it that, hey, it's done. So like, for example, if I left this open, you'll see it's errored now. And that's just telling it, hey, you are now done with this line or this attribute. So anyways, okay, so with that, we're adding the attribute background color with black. So let's see what that does. There we go, a little background color black. And so there's all kinds of attributes like this. Like I said, again, highly recommend going through kind kind of the site. It'll teach you much more than I'm going to show you today. Yeah, exactly. There's all that kind of stuff. So so first let's start with like padding, for example. So we'll do a padding of 10 pixels. And what that is it's saying, hey, let's pad this element. Let's expand the inside of it all around. So on the top, right, bottom, left by 10 pixels. And so let's see what happens when you do that. And you'll see, right? So the inside of it, so it kept the black background. So the inside of it expanded by 10 pixels on each side. Similarly, there's something called a margin. And it's kind of the same but opposite of a padding. If that's not going to make sense, but hopefully will in a second. So if we did a margin 10, for example, instead of a padding 10. So here, we'll comment this out. And so say you have a margin 10 instead of a padding. Well, actually, here. So let's go back to what it was. You can see here, right? So this is with none. If we added that margin instead of a padding, you'll see here what it did. And you only see it on the left and right because there's left and right text. There's nothing below it. But what it did right now is it added 10 pixels to the outside of the element. So you'll see the background stayed the same. It didn't get any more, but it pushed this text and these elements away from it. And so that's what a margin is. And so if you mix them together, you can use something like this, where it expands the inside and makes it gives it a little more room, but then also pushes all the other content out. And so other cool things with CSS that you can do just for fun is there's borders. Yeah, actually, we'll just go with that. There's borders. So for a border, for example, if you want to do a border and I want that border to have 1 pixel of width, I want it to be a solid border. So there's different kinds of borders you could do. You could do a segmented border, meaning it's like dotted or dashed. All different kinds. So I want it to be 1 pixel, solid. I want it to be red. Yeah, that's kind of it. So you see here, now boom, here's a red border around this content. And so you can even get a little fancier with it. You can start messing with certain attributes of it specifically. So say you want to change the radius, which means kind of the rounding of the border. You can do the radius. And so we'll do a radius of 3 pixels. Yeah, what's up? No. Oh, 8. Okay, yeah. Do 8. So we'll do a border radius of 8. So right now, technically, this is a border radius of 0. Is kind of what it defaults to. So of 8, you'll see here, now they're rounded. See how the corners are no longer straight? And if you went all the way up to, I think is it 50 pixels? It should do, yeah, like almost full circle. And so if this was a square, that's how you'd get kind of a circle element. Other kind of attributes that you can mess with in CSS that are important are things like the height and width. Right? So say I wanted the height of this to be even bigger, maybe. It's going to look terrible, but hey, just for demonstration. So the height of 200, and we'll just leave the width how it is. So if we, oh, it looks terrible. Okay, that didn't actually work how I wanted. I think I know why. Okay, so we'll do it actually to something else. So the way that CSS works is it's a cascading style sheet, which means that anything from top to bottom takes priority. So anything you declare on the top, anything below it can technically override what's above. And you don't see it here, but technically, due to just how these are sitting here inside this div, some CSS elements won't work and some will. So that's kind of something you kind of learn as you develop in CSS and in HTML. Kind of what works, what doesn't. It's all trial and error. at first, and then you learn and kind of continue from there. So one thing we can do is we'll do it on app. So now I'll show you how to call a ID versus a class, right? So a class, if we refresh, is that dot. And that's calling whatever the name of that class you called. Now to do it for an ID, it's a whatever you want to call this, hashtag pound sharp, I don't know, whatever. So you do this, and then hash would be kind of another one. So app. So this is calling that singly, and then now we could say the height of the app should be 100. So we have pixels, right? There's a bunch of different things you can do in this. So you can also do percentages, which again, so for this, because there's no parent element, which is what we'd call these. So this is a parent. These are the children, meaning these are inside of this element, of this parent element. Yeah, I forgot what I was saying, but anyway. Anyway, that's parent-child kind of relation. So this will do height. Yeah, so what I was saying is the percentage is kind of relation to this. So if you were to, instead of pixels here, if you were to say a percentage, it'll be a percentage of the parent. So for this, it'll be a percentage of the body, which is right now the height of the content. So this wouldn't do anything at the moment. But so for example, if we did height, let's see, 100. And another attribute you can do is, or attribute measurement, is the window, or what we call the view. So we have something called VH or VW, and what that means is view height or view width. And so height, for example, 100 view height means 100% of the height of this view, this screen. So if we do that, let's do background color gray, so you can see, and you'll see, well, so we have a little extra padding that's default in browsers, and so that's why you see kind of this little extra, but you'll see it's now the height technically of this page. So ways to get around that would be, so here's another thing to do. If you ever want to style an attribute in general, so for example, I want to do head. I don't need an ID or anything. There's only one head. But say you wanted to do all span. You would simply span, and then whatever you'd want in here. And then remembering, right, that that it's cascading. So anything below will override. So if you set here color red, see how the color didn't change? Well, that's because you have these, which are already overriding this, because these are a class on a span. So for cascading, right? So to show you, kind of demonstrate. So if I put it below, which means that this now overrides these. Oh, I'm going to laugh that it didn't work. That's funny. Here, let's do a better demonstration of this. So look at this guy. So that's orange. So if you went back and then did red, that's red. So it'll take whatever is basically at the bottom. So if you do the same element twice, or classes kind of always override it, but yeah, so if you do like the same element twice, or if you did the same class twice, so like say this was also dot test, that's still going to override it. So that's something to keep in mind. And that's something later when you get into screen resolution resizing and all that. That's kind of something that becomes core. Because later we'll have something called media queries, which are like little tags that just looked for resolution or screen width, and you'll start putting stuff in them. So like you'd have another test for screen width that might change the width, and it would override whatever width is here for that screen size. Yeah, yeah. CSS is a it's like per person. It's whatever you prefer. There's many ways. Some people just yeah. So yeah, there's many ways to do it. This is raw CSS. That's just in a straight CSS file. Other ways to do it. For example, you could do a style attribute, kind of like the ID here, and you could say background color blah blah blah, right? Same thing, and that's kind of another way you could do styles, and that's good for kind of one-offs, or if you're trying to dynamically add styles, add or remove stuff like that. That's really when that becomes better. The more way I would recommend is just kind of go here. It keeps it all centralized, easy to read, kind of go back to. But yeah, like Outsider saying though, there's hundreds of different ways you can do it. And this is raw CSS. I mean, later down the road, if you get really into it, there's other frameworks on top of CSS, like Sass and Less, and a bunch of other ones that add like you can do like for loops in your CSS and stuff, which gets kind of wacky and crazy. Yeah, and then like Savson said, it's inline styling. It's not terrible. It's just not recommended per se, but it has its use cases though. So there's times where you might want to do some inline styling, which is what that's called. So when you do stuff like this, it's kind of called inline, and that's totally fine. Oh, hit with a ruler. Yeah. Huh. Old school. What year? Yeah, I also like dude, old school, man. That's like freaking my grandpa. Yeah. Inline, like so I was saying, it's kind of yeah. Like for like little one-off things, like inline's not bad. And like if you're just doing something for yourself, it's nothing wrong with it. Again, that's kind of thing with programming and anything with languages. It's all preference, There are standards that are in kind of the software world, but it just all comes down to personal preference at the end of the day. I think it's kind of like what Outsider is saying. Like it's just, I don't know, everyone's got their style or flavor. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, when we get into Vue, this is all going to kind of change a bit. Not fully. I mean, this is still using Vue how it is, but it's Vue adds a lot more dynamicness to everything. And you can like dynamically set classes or anyway, yeah, you get a lot more power and control. Yeah. So here, yeah, exactly. So, yep. So here we wouldn't want. Yes. What's that? The body's technically transparent. It's just because it's a browser, so it's just white. Yeah. No. Oh, I mean, I see what you're saying. Yeah. So technically in RedM, well, with Vue it gets a little different. You don't have to do that, but yeah. So technically in CSS, there's these display methods. There's also a visibility one, but I'd recommend display. It's just if you want. It just hides the element, right? It removes it from the document. Yeah, it just depends. So like with Vue, which we'll get into later, there's something called a v-if that you can put on HTML. And that's based on a JavaScript flag. So you'd be like, ready. And whenever this is true, yeah, so this basically does the same thing. So like, if this is false, it's like saying display none. Yeah. Yeah, there's stuff like that. Yeah. But yeah, so here, like, if we're in the game, for example, and you wouldn't want it to display up front, you would do display none, and it won't display anything. And then whenever you're ready, depending if you're using JavaScript, well, you're definitely using JavaScript, depending if you're using jQuery or Vue or React or whatever framework you decide you want to use in the end, that'll then programmatically kind of override this style and will make it so it is displayed. So for jQuery, for example, there's a like dot show or fade in, and then that'll kind of override this value essentially. But yeah, so see here, right? So we're changing the height and width of this element. Everything's kind of staying inside of it, kind of terribly because it's just not styled very well. But yeah, so there's all kinds of things you can do. And then you eventually get into tricks. Where you can start centering things, like doing weird margin zero auto. A lot of things. So like this, for example, now you have kind of a. So what we're gonna build here, I guess, right, is we can do a little notification. So we'll do what we call a hello world. Yes, this is being recorded. So I will upload it to YouTube, and then well, I'll probably edit it a little bit, put it on YouTube, and then I'll make sure to share it with the community. Hi YouTube, yeah. My whole 0 followers, yeah hello. Unfortunately, Angel, no, the last one was not recorded. Yeah, someone recorded it, but the audio, unfortunately, did not make it through. Yeah, maybe at some point, I'll make a new one or something, I don't know. But yeah, that one, unfortunately, had to have been there. Okay, so let's start styling some things inside of this element. Yep. So you can hide scroll bars. So there's actually a couple you can do beyond that too, where like if you wanted to style a scroll bar to like exactly what you want it as, there's a couple other attributes as well. Yeah, but there's some specific CSS tags you can do where it'll just override like what's there. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it just depends. Yeah, because if you don't have scroll, like, it just depends how much content there is. Yeah, because if it's like infinite and you can't, then like the alternative, right, would be like if you didn't do a scroll bar, then you do pages. So you'd like pagination, right? So you'd be like what's an example of pagination easily? If you go to Google, actually, pagination. So like, well, technically this is pagination, like infinitely loading, but it's scrolling. But pagination, wow, Google doesn't do it anymore? That's annoying. You know at the bottom when they used to have like 1, 2, like all different O's or whatever, and 1, 2, 3, and you click on it, you go to the next page, or the next result, that's pagination. Which basically just means there's pages. So like if you didn't want scroll and you had a big list of things, you go, okay, this is page 1, which has 10 items. Then you have page 2, which has another 10 items, page 3, so on and so forth. Okay, so here we're adding another div inside of this div because I want to basically center this inside of it. And I want to style it separately. So we're going to get rid of this because we don't need this anymore. And we called it copy. And so we're going to do a width 100%, right? And then we're going to go color white, and then text align, which is just, are we aligning the text left, center, right? So we're going to do center. Boom. And then what we can do is, I think your TV's coming through, by the way, outsider. Yeah. So we call that an infinite scroll, or like infinity scrolls instead of paginated, and that's like the new trend now. Like instead of pages, because people don't want to click, I guess, and they would rather scroll on browsers. Maybe not in RedM like games, but yeah. Okay, so we have this. Let's do. I don't really need that. Yeah. Copy. So here we'll do margin top 10. You'll see. Yeah, you see it moved the whole element. So you'll probably want to do instance padding top. And then height. Let's just have it dynamic. No, we don't want that. Let's do. So min height, there's also a max height and then height. And what that really is saying the height for this element has to at least be this. So I had it up at 30. It's gonna do that. So that just means like if I added more text here that went beyond that. Actually, I just do this. Yeah. See, I made it bigger. So that's kind of, you have some content that can be a little more dynamic in size. You don't always have to declare the height and width of things. Hello world. Boom. And then let's do a border radius. So the cool thing about border radiuses is you don't have to use them with borders. So you can technically use a border radius to corner a div or an element, and you don't have to have like a red border or anything like that. It'll just kind of work, which is really nice. And so say you're like, hey, for me, for example here, right? I don't want these top ones. So what would I do? Well, if you go here, you'll see there's a border bottom left radius. Unfortunately, there is no border bottom radius. You have to do each corner. But so instead we want top, right? So we want the top left and the top right. And remember, so CSS, right? Things below override what's on top. So because here we defined all 4 of them above, and now we're redefining them below. So we're going to redefine those top ones, and then there you go. Now it looks like it's kind of coming from the top of the screen. Let's also make this a little darker because that'll look better. So now you'll see if I restart this. Okay, so we restarted that. We'll start up RedM. And I'll show you what this looks like. And you will see, because we did not hide it, we didn't do display none, and we don't have any JavaScript yet determining that, you'll see what happens. So once we load in, I think I included this resource. Yeah, so you'll see we loaded in and that element is already here before we've even selected a character, before anything. That's what happens. So NUI basically, once you load into the server like this, and then load in even before characters, so truly just once you've, like, in the technical sense of loaded into the server, your UI, your NUI is fully ready to go and ready. So it's, you know, it's there. So even if I go and click in, that's just going to stay there, right? So that being said, that's kind of, let's see. Yeah, that's our CSS kind of overview. And then now we can get into some JavaScript, which I don't have a raw JavaScript file, but yeah, so here, we'll ignore all this view, pretend that's not there. That's not there, you don't see that. So JavaScript, so kind of like Lua or C or any language, they all kind of operate the same. Truthfully, once you can read one, it doesn't take you as long to start reading others. Obviously, you still have to learn them and still have to do it, but it becomes a lot easier. So kind of like our last event that we did, you know, learning to read programming is key. Whether that's Lua, JavaScript, C#, whatever. Just learn it in depth, and it's all the concepts, core concepts translate. So if statements, for loops, while loops, thread, like that kind of stuff all is similar. And then it really what changes between each language is the syntax. And what I mean by that is the terminology, and then kind of, just the terminology that's used, the different ways they go about it. So for example, you know, JavaScript and CSS use curly brackets or curly braces, or mustache, whatever you want to call it. They use that as to where, you know, Python and Lua don't use those. Instead, they have end tags, or they have, does or then, or, you know, all those kind of different elements to kind of get that same effect. But they all do the same thing at a high level. So for example, you know, in JavaScript, so for example, Lua, right? You'd have your if, so we'll do something in Lua, and then we'll do something in JavaScript. So let's do local test equals test, and then you'd be like, if test equals test. Then, okay. So this is going to give me a bunch of errors. Ignore it, because we're technically in a JavaScript file. That's why it's doing this. But then you'd be like, then print test, right? And so if you ran this, right, it would go through. It would say, okay, test does equal test. So then we're going to print it. We're going to print it out into the logs. And so in JavaScript, the equivalent of this is pretty similar, actually. And it is let test equal test if, and in JavaScript you have to use parentheses, so you can't just be like if test, you know, blah blah blah. That won't work. So you have to kind of include it. You got to wrap it in parentheses. So you go if test equals test. You're kind of like, this is kind of like the then. And then for this, they don't have a print like the same. So instead what it is, it's the console. And you want to log out to the console. And you want to log out test. And this is doing the same exact thing. So if you were to run this, right, it would look, it'd say, hey, is this test? And if so, log it out. And so that's kind of similar between that. For loops do work differently in certain ways. There's not like pairs and iPairs. But the equivalent, right, of like of an iPair, for example, or a pair would be a for each. All right, and so you have your array of whatever. So an array is just a list of things. So in Lua, for example, an array would be a table that has a list of things. So like local test equals, test to so on and so forth, right? Like if you kept doing that, technically what that's called is an array. It's an array of elements or a list of elements. And so when you see that here, that's what that means. So in JavaScript, it's denoted a little different. So you'd say let test equal, and instead of curly braces, we use square braces for arrays specifically. And you'd say, test A, test B. And this will go through it. And then your element, if you were to go here and console log these out, the first log out of element would be test A, the second one would be test B, so on and so forth. And you can do that as well with if you wanted a list of objects or a list of tables, essentially, which those use curly braces, and they operate very similarly to a table. So you could be like key, and so instead of equal, right, so a table would be this, right, key value. Well, instead for this, it's with, with that. So you'd be like key and then blah, blah, blah. And then you could have a bunch of these. And then same thing here. The first element of this that you console logged out of it would be this. And then the second and third. And the way you'd get this, if you wanted to console log the key, for example, or print out the key, you'd go elements.key. And then that will log out your key. And when you use NUI, the nice thing about these logs is they do also generally spit out into your F8 log, similar to like Lua and all of that. So it really helps keep track of that. You can still see it in game. Another way to see it, which we'll go over in a second, is the NUI DevTool. And what that is literally this. So if you ever go into Chrome and you right click and you click inspect, this right here, DevTools, it's the Chrome DevTool. This is the same thing NUI uses. So NUI uses Chrome or Chromium more correctly under the hood. And that's what they're using for NUI. And so that's what this is, that DevTool. And it lets you do really cool things. So first you have your console, right, which is what we're talking about. And this is where those logs would print out if you wanted to check here instead of the F8 window. Or if you wanted to see if there was an error or, just something in your UI. Another cool thing you can do, which when we get into, we already did the styling, but say we wanted to do more styling in game, you can use this little tool here, this little box with a mouse inside of it. And now you can hover over your elements, granted we only have 2, and it'll tell you. So you see here, this is a div with with hashtag copy, the hash of copy, so the ID of copy and the elements. And when you click on it, you can see it pulled you up. This is the HTML. And here's your CSS. And here's the kind of fancy thing about this. You can go through and live edit all of this stuff. Now it won't save, so keep that in mind. It will not save. But what you can then do, right, is that this is your copy element. I'm going to highlight this and Control C. Come over here. Control V. And here's my change that I did live. And then now when I click and refresh, now it's there. So you can do the same exact thing in RedM, which is pretty awesome. And so the way that you do this, if you don't know, is you click F8, you go to Tools, NUI, Open DevTools. Now, once you've done this, you'll want to kind of push it out of the way, and then you want to go back in game, click F8 to close it. And then once that's closed, you can pull up that NUI DevTool again,
and do the same thing. So you see here, there's all these iframes with the names. These are all the different scripts that use NUI. So you see here we have NUI class, which is what we're using. And you'll see I can manually click through and see everything we did, right? So here's our ID app. Here's our hello world. And you'll see it even highlights it as I go over it. So you can do that, or like we did over there, you can click the square with the mouse icon. And then, once you have that, let's see, once you have that, it usually works. Or not. Okay. Well, for me right now, it's not working. But usually it works. You can kind of go over and click. If not, you can do what I just did, right? So you go through, find your script, and you just keep clicking these drop-down arrows until you find the stuff you need. So you'll see HTML head body. That was closed, right? So here's your head that we did. Here's the body that we did. Oh, I see what you're saying. So you could, yeah, so you could, oh, I see. Yeah, then here you go. Yep. Yeah, that's a good call. So that's another way to do it. Yep. So you go here and it'll give you the whole CSS in one shot rather than having to do each element. Which that could be pretty handy. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so that's kind of the dev tool. Another powerful thing of the dev tool, although in RedM you don't need it as much, but I'll just point it out because it can be helpful, especially if you ever want to make calls to not like our server, but to a RedM server, but something else or whatever. There's this network tab. And this will basically tell you any network calls. So if you're calling an image from a website, or you're calling data from a website or from a server, it'll show up here. And you can kind of track if it failed, if it didn't. And that gets more in depth. There's all this kind of stuff here that you can kind of fiddle around with. But yeah, the main ones you're really going to want to kind of mess around with is elements, console, and then sources. Which will give you your CSS to copy out. So that's some of the power that you can do with the dev tool. And then JavaScript. So that's probably a little more I can go over. So again, so here's an array for each. Another way to do it, technically array.forEaches are pretty inefficient in JavaScript. They're very easy. They work really well, but they're kind of slow in relation to like other JavaScript methods. So another one would be like a for loop, which is very similar to a Lua for loop, not a pairs loop, but a true traditional one. And what it's saying is we're going to start at 0. Oh, one important thing to note, a difference between Lua and JavaScript. In JavaScript, arrays, their index starts at 0. In Lua, the index starts at 1. So it's just something to keep in mind if you're going between the two languages. So for example, that's why here in this for loop, we start at index 0, meaning the first spot. And then what we're going to do is say, okay, so keep running this for loop until the index is less than the length of the array, which means the length of the array is how many elements you have in the array. That would be the equivalent of like hashtag or hash, the table or array, and it gives you the number or how many elements. Same thing. So array.length. And then here, index ++. So that is a shorthand terminology for JavaScript. And what that is saying, and I'll break that out for you real quick, is it's saying index equals index +1. So this is shorthand for that. Equally, right, there's also shorthand you may see where it's this equivalent of -1, which is index minus minus. So again, just a shorthand thing, just to kind of explain it so if it doesn't cause some confusion. What that's really saying is just this index, grab it and add a 1 to it. And so that way it's incrementing each loop. So it starts at 0 and then it adds another one. So then it goes to the next index of 1, then 2, then 3, depending on however many elements are in here. And if you had it this way, instead of having this element, or the element that was in the for each, instead you define your element above. So you'd say let element equal your so test, I guess, would be the array. So you go test and then the index. So it's saying element in this array, in this instance of the array, this time it's looping, we're setting this new variable called element, and we're gonna set it as test array index 0, and that would be this. So that'd be like saying this kind of, right? And then you can go from here and console.log element.key. And we're kind of the same. This is technically more optimized, more efficient. Both work equally well, but just another way to show of how you can loop through data. We also have the same while loops as Lua. So very similar, while and then whatever. So, while test, meaning while test is not null or not nil. Run something, right? And keep doing it. So same concept. Stay away from those if you don't need them. If you need them, you'll know you need them. This sounds... No, whiles. I mean, you could, but so in Java, you don't really have like the citizen.thread. You don't really need to do that in this. Yeah, so there's not, like, for me, like, I do JavaScript professionally for my work, and in the last 5 years of doing like JavaScript specifically, I think I've used a while loop once. Yeah, it's very rare, very very rare, because you go ahead. Yeah, that's because it's spamming it so fast, and then you get things like infinite while loops, so it goes forever until you turn it off. And yeah, so in JavaScript, it's you just don't really need waits, really. Whiles. Yeah, there's some more intricacies in JavaScript as well, where it's so Lua, for example, everything runs what we call synchronously, meaning it all runs essentially top to bottom, right? So if you have code, whatever is above it is gonna run. The same thing in JavaScript, right? So element, anything below it is gonna, like if I did console log this above it, that's not gonna work. But JavaScript, which Lua has as well, but it's not as commonly used, I've noticed, has a concept called async. And what that basically is doing is it's saying, go run this other task while this code runs. If that makes sense. And so it waiting things and stuff like that, like a wait in Lua, it becomes a little more complex in JavaScript, but something to worry about later down the road as you guys kind of learn JavaScript. It's at first up front, it's not as needed, but it is something to learn. What if you decide to get kind of further into JavaScript. But yeah, okay, so here's some raw JavaScript. Another quick thing for me to note for you guys, as you've seen me do let test for all my variables. There's 3 other ways of doing that in JavaScript. So first, actually, before we even get to the other 2 ways, the ways in Lua to do this, right, is there's 2. You have one where it's global, meaning it can be used in pretty much any file. So like if you have if you have a variable that's global in your client, you can use it pretty much in any other client script, or in other client file, I should say. So that would be like saying, like, test, right? Test equals true in Lua. You cannot really do that in JavaScript, but I mean, there's a way to do that. Sorry. So there's that, which would mean global, meaning it can be used everywhere, and then you have local, right? So local test equals true, which local means that it's private, or it's essentially it's used specifically in whatever section of code that you're in. So in like your script, if you put it above, something, you could then use it. But if you put it inside of an if statement, it could only be used inside that if statement kind of thing, right? So the equivalent of that in JavaScript, so we'll do the equivalence, right? So the equivalent of a global in JavaScript would be var. So var test equals true. So that's the same kind of thing as saying global. So global test equals true. This can kind of be used everywhere, not in other files like Lua does it, unless instead of Lua you're using JavaScript, which then it works a little different, but besides the point. So yeah, anyway, so that's global, means if I declared this at the top of the file, or if I, declared this, in an if statement, I could potentially use it outside of it. Honestly, for the most part, let whatever will cover almost all use cases of this. It's really just kind of nitpicky in JavaScript whether you use var or let. They're not super strict about it. Lua is a lot more strict about it. And then the third option for JavaScript, which you will see occasionally if you look at other people's code or anything, is you'll see const, const, which stands for constant. And what that is it's a constant variable, meaning it's immutable. It cannot be changed. Once you set this once, JavaScript will not let you change it again. So if you wanted to go, test A, so we can differentiate. So if we want to be like test A equals false after, this would throw you an error and say you cannot change an immutable object. So you cannot change a variable that has been defined as constant. It is a static variable. So those are kind of the three definitions of variables in JavaScript that are very important to know. So that's kind of, to be honest, that's the basis of JavaScript. Again, there is more that we can go into if y'all want. But if you have any questions. So a constant means that it cannot change. Yeah, so once you set it once, you cannot set it again. No, so it's different. So not constantly changing, but think of it as it's a constant variable. It is constantly that value. Yeah, but no. I could see why you'd see that. Like it's like constantly changing, or it's like, yeah. No, that kind of, I could see how you'd see that. Yeah, so if you wanted to do that, you would just use a var or a let. Yeah, so var or let. I usually use let for everything because it kind of scopes things down nicely, but so const, for example, so for this, for example, I'm importing something from Vue. So what this is saying here is it's grabbing essentially Vue.createUp, and I don't want anyone to change that ever. It's pretty rarely used, to be honest, but it's really just like, say you want to create a dictionary. So say you want to create a say in Lua, for example, like say we had a config.js, right, instead of config. Right, say this was like a JavaScript object instead, which is very similar. And you didn't want this to be changed by anyone other than like going into this file and manually changing it by hand, you would make it a const, and then JavaScript would make it so that the client, the server, nothing could ever change the config. If that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Hold on, I cannot. Wow, my words just totally did not function. Brain, what is happening? Juice stain. Yeah, like you said, creating an array of a set amount of objects or items that you don't want to be dynamic or add to. You might make constant. That being said, any other questions, I guess, or comments about JavaScript, CSS? I know I didn't ask about CSS, so I didn't have any questions, so that as well. JavaScript's a lot more complex. I mean, I'm just touching the surface here. Yep, and even beyond that, I mean, there's still more in just pure JavaScript that I haven't explained yet. Like I said, like the async await, asynchronous, synchronous. That stuff all gets a lot more in depth. Yeah. Yeah. So asynchronous or synchronous. So for example, let's say, what version of JS is being used? So the beauty of JS is it's whatever Chrome is using. So pretty much any version will work. Technically, if you're looking for version, it's ES5 is what it's called. ES5. So like elephant, snake, 5. But yeah, so it's ES5 JavaScript is technically what this is using. And that's what the browsers use. It's all built on Google's JavaScript V8 engine. I don't know, this is very in depth of what of Java, but if you're curious, Sav, that's what it is. Yeah, ES6 is great. I just don't want to explain how to do ES6 to people yet, Sav, because we're not using npm or build methods. And for ES6, you have to use build methods. So you'd have to use Babel, and then you'd have to build and transpile it, which basically what it does is it transpiles all that ES6 into ES5. Because browsers technically don't support ES6 natively yet. Yeah, fun stuff. Fun stuff. But yeah, so async await. Yeah, I guess we can go into that real quick. So just at a very high level, I'll show you how to use it. And maybe that'll kind of inherently explain how it works. Let me find an example real quick that I know will work well. So what we're going to do is JavaScript doesn't technically have a wait function that doesn't have a wait function that Lua does because it's asynchronous, meaning it can run multiple things in code together. So for example, the way you would do this in Lua, or a sort of equivalent, would be citizen.thread. What that's doing is creating a new asynchronous task. Like, so example, if you have two citizen.threads running, they both run together, right, at the same time, but they're running different code. Same kind of concept. So for example, in Vue or JavaScript, if you call functions, they can be asynchronous, meaning, hey, I can call this function and then call this other function immediately after. They're both asynchronous, meaning they can both be called at the same time. And so to do that, for example, let's see. So let me not do Vue, sorry. So if we're in JavaScript and you wanted to do that, so this is some shorthand. Let me break this out into something that's more understandable. Delay equals, so this is all shorthand JavaScript. If you ever see this, what this is saying, it's shorthand for functions is what this is. Right, so this is saying with a function with the input variable ms, And then this is what the function's running. It's the same equivalent of this. And then it's saying delay equals that function, or what I'm going to do here. So all different ways of just writing the same thing in JavaScript. There's many ways to do it. This is another way. This is the same thing. And here we go. And so what we're going to do is we're going to make this an async function that's going to await this function. So what this is saying is this function here, whenever this function gets called, it gets called on its own thread. It gets called, like I could call this 5 times and they will all independently run and they will come back to me at their own times. And I can keep running other code. And so what this is saying though is that's this function. When you're inside this function now, this await is saying, because this function right here that's getting called, although you don't see it because it's built in, this is an async function, meaning that it has a callback or it has a .then, like it runs separately. And so what we're saying here is because this also runs that way, we want to await. This is kind of like waiting, like if you did like in Lua, like wait 10. So what we're saying instead is wait for this function to be done. And once that's done, yeah, AFK, okay. And once that's done, we could return it, we could do something with it, you know, whatever. And so what we'll do down here, right, is we'll go delay, and then however many milliseconds, right? So delay 1,000. So we'd be like, you know, console.log, hello, and then console.log world, right? And what this will do is this will go, okay, it'll print out hello. It'll wait, you know, 1 second, and then it'll say world. Well, in JavaScript, this actually wouldn't work. So this is like Lua, I guess, right? So you'd be like, wait. And in Lua, that would work. For this, because, right, it has to be asynchronous. So you'd have to have a run function. So you'd be like run, and then you'd add this in here. So that's why I say it differs from Lua in the sense that JavaScript is kind of inherently asynchronous versus Lua is inherently synchronous. But now again, this being said, you could also do that, and I would say hello world, but there'd be no delay. So now that we have this, and you go wait, or await, sorry, and then you go run the function. This now will work. So now it's saying run this function, and now I'm running it. Like this is like having your, like, you know, whatever's starting in your Lua script, kind of same concept. And so okay, now that we've run it, we're gonna console log this. Let's say hello. Now it's gonna await this asynchronous function, which is awaiting this asynchronous function. So it's making it synchronous, right? So it's adding like steps basically, right? So it's going, okay, first let's run this, and then we're gonna then run this and wait for it. Now while this is running, it's gonna run this and wait for that. So now once this is done, this then becomes done. And now that this is done, this next thing can run. And so the reason you'd have to do that is so if you didn't have this and you ran that, this would actually do a hello world and then wait. Because technically this is getting run and then it's continuing on because it's asynchronous. You can run code at the same time. So just a kind of more in-depth concept there, but just something that hopefully will help you be able to read it and you know, as you go through, and hopefully maybe what I've said will kind of will come to mind as you go through and read it. Like, oh, that's what he meant by that. But so that's kind of the async await pattern. And so this is kind of cool, right? So this is something like, so in Lua, to get this same kind of effect, you would have something called a callback, right? So say you're calling the server, and then like you call the, like you send an event to the server does some stuff, and then has to then send an event back to the client. Well, in this, that's kind of different. So with this, you wouldn't have to do that actually. And then callbacks are kind of obsolete in JavaScript. You can still do callbacks. They work the same way, exactly the same. But this makes it obsolete in the sense that you could, fetch whatever. So like down here, we're sending something to NUI to our Lua, and you might want to, await this. You might want to be like, okay, well, I want the results of this. So you might be like, let results equal that. And, now that you have this, you could be like, oh, print out the results or print out whatever. So like say you made a request to your server and then you needed data, you don't have to have a callback. Like it kind of inherently knows to do it. But that's, and that's very specific to what's being called. So like here, fetch is an asynchronous function. So you may see some people use something called Axios, which is another fetch library. It's a tool within JavaScript that someone has made. That's async await, kind of a more high level. Okay, any other questions about JavaScript, NUI, CSS before we get into frameworks? Anything that was confusing that might need more explaining? If so, feel free to type it into the community dev chat. If you go above where you connected into the channel, there's a little chat icon that says open chat, and you can chat there if you would like. I'm gonna drink some water while I wait. Okay. I guess then if there's no questions, we'll move on. So next we will move on to, I guess, Vue. It's kind of the more complex of them all. And if you guys end up liking this section, let me know. I might, probably not next week, but in a couple weeks, I'm happy to do a more in-depth Vue kind of walkthrough, or even a jQuery one if that's of interest. So to get started, Vue. So let's kind of go down here. So Vue docs. So in this document here is Vue. Here's kind of the starter. So here you go, a progressive JavaScript framework. And what JavaScript frameworks are, or what a framework is, similar to how Vorp is a framework on RedM, Vue is a framework on JavaScript. So it's a tool that basically takes JavaScript, HTML, and CSS and brings in more powerful techniques that you can leverage to then build very powerful UIs. Which can pretty much do anything you can imagine. And so this website, Vue.js.org, highly recommend. They have some pretty good little getting started things. It does get a little more complicated up front because it does use something called NPM or Node.js, which is something I would go over if we do a more in-depth view of how to build it, how to use it to its fullest extent. Because the way we're using it here, it's not to the fullest extent, but it, in my opinion at least, my preference, it just works better for me than jQuery. That being said, jQuery can be just as powerful when used in how we're using it here. When we get more in depth and start using NPM and stuff, jQuery doesn't even come close to the power of Vue. So again, here's a very good tool. Another tool actually that's pretty good, so you don't need NPM if you want to mess around with it, would be like or CodePen, I guess. Yeah. So here you could use something like this, which I can link there as well. This is a little website that lets you kind of mess around with JavaScript, CSS, HTML live. And you don't need NPM or anything like that. It's very similar to how we have it in our app. And this lets you play around without having to do any of it. So you can go into this HTML, right, and be like, hello. And then you click run, and there you go, hello. So this is a very, very powerful tool as well to kind of be able to go through and just play around. It's a little playground. You got to go test things out, see if it works, see if your idea works before you, go try it out in RedM or, whatever. So I will actually add that to the doc. So let's add this to the docs, and we'll say Vue.js online playground. So you guys can use that. Okay. So that being said, I think I'm actually just going to use this right here to kind of explain Vue. This will make it a lot easier to demonstrate. So let's clean this out so that you guys can see what's going on. So all this should start looking familiar, right? So the CSS is exactly the same. Well, not exactly the same as what we had, but you know what I mean? Like it's same kind of concept. Oh my gosh. Here we go. So we'll do that, and we'll leave these attributes here for now. Whatever, that's fine. Well, actually, what we could do is carry ours over. So let's do that. Let's take this. So you'll see here though, there's no header, body, footer. Yeah, you don't necessarily need those in this because it's kind of doing the file linking for you. But just know that like anything in here is it's this right here. See? So we'll have this. Here's our hello world that we made. Let's go and grab our styles that we created. And you'll already see, right? Here's our little HTML CSS that we did. And that's kind of it. App.view. I will explain these in a bit, but let's first go over how Vue itself works, and then I'll explain how NUI then interacts with the UI. So Vue. So Vue at its core is pretty simplistic. It definitely has a different methodology or a different way of thinking about how you interact with a website. jQuery is very JavaScript heavy. Pretty much everything's in JavaScript. Vue does a nice thing where a lot of it's in JavaScript, but a lot of it's also in HTML, which is, in my opinion, very nice. So I'll do we'll do this hello world, and then if you guys are interested after, we can, I can try to make a jQuery equivalent, and you guys can kind of see what the difference is. Yeah, so for here, so we'll start out. So structure. So you'll see here, we have new view, and you'll see in here as well. It's the same. So a little different, I should say. Ignore that difference. But this is a new view. It's saying the same thing as this. This create app and constant is the same equivalent as this part right here. So I mean, honestly, here we'll do this, which I think technically should still work. I just want to double check. Yeah, okay, that still works. Okay, so I'll do this. I'll actually link this specific JS fiddle versus this one, so you guys have exactly what I'm doing. Let's link that. Okay. So we don't need this anymore. Let's do it. Okay. So let me get rid of the stuff we don't need for now. Okay. So Vue has kind of a basic structure, you could say. So I'll kind of go over that. So Vue, and I'll just kind of explain what this is saying. So line by line, line 1 is saying, let's grab the function create app from Vue, which Vue is what we import or what we call in our HTML here, right here, vendor Vue.js. And so what that JavaScript is doing is it's exposing a global variable called Vue that we're leveraging right here. And so what we're saying, and this is kind of the fancy way of saying, like, if it was like this is the equivalent of saying const v equals Vue, and then you'd be like v or create app equals v dot create app. So this is the same as this. This is just pulling this function out of this and exposing it. So now we can use that create app. And so what this is saying is create an app with Vue here. And so what it's saying, and we're going to skip real quick to the closing tag and ignore what's in the middle here for just a quick second. So it's saying we're going to create the app, and once whatever we have for this app that's going to work and be powered, this is the app really, is this inside. And after that, we're going to chain, so we're going to call the dot mount. And what that's saying is create this app and then mount it to the DOM, to the document object model. And the DOM is just the HTML, the browser. So this is saying on the ID app, so this div ID, mount our Vue app, which means inject all our Vue logic and stuff and whatever we're doing here into this. This is letting Vue know that, hey, anything inside this div is Vue. So if I went out here and tried to mess with Vue, not going to work. But if you go in here, going to work, right? So that's what that's saying. Next, we'll get into is the data. And what data is saying here is kind of like your global variables. But these are any kind of variable, any kind of data that you want to use in your HTML, in your display, you can declare it here. So instead of my copy here, right, which was hello world, right? So this was our copy. This is what we had. Maybe that wasn't the exclamation, but whatever. So this is our copy. So instead of here, we could actually define it in Vue. And what we do is curly braces for that. And technically this is called handlebars. There's another library which you might see paired with JavaScript sometime. Like I think, like I want to say Black Pegasus added handlebars into the menu API for the upcoming character stuff. And like it gives you kind of this same methodology. But so double curly braces. So you have two left, two opening, two closed. What that signifies is whatever data is here. So I'm jumping around a bit and I apologize. So we're going to go here in our data and we're going to call this our message, right? And so this message is going to say hello world. And so we want to then display this message in our HTML, just how it was, right? So right now, if we left it like this, right, it's just going to display nothing. It's how do we get this in? Well, you can't just do this, right, because that's just text. So we'll do those curly braces I mentioned. So you do the double curly brace, paste it in, and then run. And as you'll see, hello world, our string here is now here. Now the beauty of this is that you can now modify this and it will update that. You don't have to do, a call for this ID and then a value or anything like that. You simply, so say I wanted to change this on a button click, right? So how do we do that, right? So similar to this data and how it's in this create app, there's other functions or methods that Vue provides to you. So another one that they use is called methods. And what that lets you do are really what methods mean is functions. It's all your functions that you want to call. I'm sorry, it's not a... so all your functions you want to call. So you might, so here's our methods, and we're going to have a function that's change message, right? Because we want to change this message. And hey, we can get kind of fancy with it even, right? We can go, we'll pass it a message even. So here we go. We've got our function. We've got our variable that we want to pass through. And here we go. So we'll go this dot message. And so this is where it kind of varies, right? If you had like message, let message equal test, this would not work. This only pulls from this data area. And so yes, technically this would work by doing message equals whatever, and that will update this. But if you want to update anything that's in data or in methods, anything that's in this view, it has a context. It has its app. And if you want to call anything in the app, basically, you use what we call this. And what this is it's this app. So you go this app, and the message from this app. So we'll go this.message. And we'll say, we're going to set the message from this app to whatever we pass through as the message from this function. And so now we need a way to call this function. So there's a different ways you could kind of do it. And so for the first start, we're going to do a button. So it might be, button. Well, here, we'll even do it inside. So we'll go button at click. So this is Vue's way of saying, hey, look for a click. So we're going to go at and then click. So when something has been clicked, we are going to then, so in the template or in this HTML, you don't have to use this. This for this app only has to be referenced in JavaScript, which might be a little confusing. But when you're in the template, you don't have to do that. It already kind of knows because you're in this ID app parent. So because you're in that, kind of like here, right? So message, you didn't have to do this dot message. You just did message, and it works. So for same thing for methods here. So you'd say change message, and then let's change it to something. No worries, Acronia. Wow, my words have been kind of bad today. No worries at all. Glad to have you, even if it's a little late. We've definitely kind of gone through quite a bit, and we're in the kind of Vue phase now. But I've recorded this. Hopefully the audio and everything's good. If so, I will be uploading it. So don't worry. You'll have a chance to kind of go back and catch up on everything we've talked up to at this point. Okay, so we're going to do button at click change message, and then we'll change this message. We'll do Vorp rules, right? Oh, what did I break? Equals message, change message. Oh, I'm silly. I didn't. I might want to close out the button. So we're gonna close out the button, closing tag. And we'll give the button a name. We'll say change message. There you go. So you see hello world. Next to it, you'll see a change button. I actually want that on the next line. This is more for prototyping. I highly do not recommend using break lines like this. Use CSS to do this, but just for our demo purposes right now, I'm going to use a break line, which basically just means break it to the next line. I mean, you could even do two of them. It's kind of a lazy way of styling, I guess. Alternative to that, right, would be, I could even do like a little inline style. Let's style equals margin top. There. So that would be like a style equivalent. I mean, I could also technically do this alternatively as well, right? So I could go ID equals change button. Then you go in here and you can go change button. And then, so now that that's there, right? So now we'll see, right? So there's the styling change, and if I go and click, boom, changed it live right there. Vorp rules. All with just this code right here. That's it. Yeah, and you could do other things too. So say, so Vue has what we call a lifecycle. And what that means is when this app's created, it goes through certain stages to prepare it to be ready for this. So there's a before create, or there's a created and a mounted. So this mount, right? So we have created, which generally you don't have to worry about. And if you had anything in here, that means run this code when the created lifecycle event happens. Now, the one that you really want to worry about, or not even worry about, but the one that you're probably going to use more than ever in that sense is something called mounted. And that's the equivalent of running something up here, but just in the app. And so what this is saying is don't run any code until this app is ready, until it's mounted and it's ready to go. So what we could do, for example, right, is we could say, this dot, this dot message equals ready, right? And we'll see that should change the message. Boom. So you see, you barely even see this default hello world. Actually, you don't, because it's mounted here. So you could even do is, say this was a null and you had some data that was coming through that you wanted to set. You could do it this way, technically. But generally, I just try to keep it up here. But that's just something to do. So, for example, you could do, when the app's not ready, don't show it. Right? So you might go v-if. And so what this is saying is it's a conditional. It's a Vue template conditional. So it's saying if some condition, then render or display everything that is in this parent. So for example, I might say v-if message equals ready, right? Equals ready. So it's comparing. Oh, oops. And I'm messing up all over the place. Sorry. So yeah. So now you'll see when I run, I mean, it's still kind of that, right? But if we take, let's see. So if we do I just want to grab from here because I'm lazy. Set timeout. Oh, whoops. Set. Okay, or don't. Fine. So if we did a set timeout. For 4 seconds. So we're gonna basically delay this logic by 4 seconds. So it's gonna mount, it's gonna delay by 4 seconds, and then it's gonna run this logic inside of it. Assuming that I set up this set timeout correctly, which I did. Okay, so you'll see. So here, looks displays nothing. And then boom, now it's displaying. So that kind of shows you, right? You can go through and you can modify these attributes. So you could even have one instead of ready that changes the message, right? You could have one that says showing. So you might have one that's showing, might be false. If I could hit the right keys. And we probably want to move all of this. To be honest, we probably want to move this to a wrapper. And you'll see why. We're going to call this ID equals wrap. And then we're going to move this VF to the wrap. So now, as you'll see, nothing displays until it's ready. And again, so we want to do this showing. So we can go message, so VIF showing, which is just checking, hey, is it true or false? And then we'll say instead of here, this dot message, we'll go this dot showing equals true. So, waited that 4 seconds, it's displaying, and now I can click change message, and the message is changed. So this is some of the like core power of Vue, is you can do all of this with pretty much just this code. And it may look like a lot of code, but it's really not. And the beauty of it is it really keeps it very well organized. And so where some of this power even further comes into play is you can do things like change style attributes. You know, if you say, hey, I want to go in here and I want to change the color of the text based on what it says. So if we want to do that, we would say style. So in Vue, you can go style equals, and this is static. Anything you put in here is just like pure HTML, nothing. Now in Vue, if you add a colon in front of it, that makes it dynamic, which basically means now what I can do is I can have an object in here, and this object can define a style. So I can have this object, and I can say the key of this object is whatever attribute I want to change. So actually, so where we're going to want to do this, is here. So we might say that we want to change the color of this class, or of this div, which essentially is the class as well. But I want to change the color of this div to can I make the box go down like a slide? Oh, like animated? Yeah, you could totally do that. And I can show that in a sec. But there's a little more in depth, but yeah, we can definitely. So you might say, you know, oh shoot. Okay, we're up here. Okay. So here we would want to say, you know, message. So we're basically saying this color. So we're gonna do a ternary. This is kind of confusing. Maybe I don't do that. We're gonna do something fancy. We're sort of fancy. We're gonna do copy style, and see how there's the method mounted data. Well, there's another one. There's quite a few. Another one called computed. And computed operates very similarly to a method. But instead what it does is it will change its value whenever something inside of it changes. So for example, we're going to have our change button, which is going to look like a function, but it's not. So, I mean, it is a function, but it's so change button, and we're going to say change button is going to return, and it's going to equal this. And more specifically, we're going to go let color equal blank. So it'll use whatever the default is that's in this copy. So that's the color, and then we'll say if this dot message equals Vorp rules, then color will equal something else. Let's do red. Why not? So color will equal red instead. And then so what we'll do here is color will pipe into this. Okay. So now we'll see this will take, we're going to lower this timer because 2 seconds is pretty, or 4 seconds is pretty wild. There we go, 2 seconds. So we'll see here, it's white. The change message, and if I go and click change, it didn't change, okay. Let me remove the class. Let's see, copy, color white. Okay, why are you being annoying like that? Let's do it without the ID. Wait, what? Sorry. Don't know why this is not working at the moment. Oh, because I didn't actually put it in. You know, that might help. So change style. And then this needs to go into this style. And then now, there we go. Now it's red. So this is another powerful thing of Vue, is you can go through and change the styling like very easily. And another way, and there's different ways you could do this. So that's one way. You could go and directly modify, a style like this and feed it a new style attribute. Alternatively, you could also do this by setting a reference. So instead of this style, you might do a reference. So you might say ref equals, what did we call it? C style. I don't know, what do you want to call it? C style. So custom style, and then we could go into this message and manually change it. So we can go, okay, change the message and do this dot refs, and then whatever the reference is called. And then we go dot style dot color equals red. I believe that should work too. What did I do wrong? Oh, there we go. Okay, so that other style was conflicting with it, this one. But okay, so say, obviously you wouldn't use both methods together, so it's, you'd have one or the other. But so this is another way of doing it. This is kind of more like jQuery. So jQuery equivalent of this would be like, this would be the equivalent in jQuery. If you're curious, it's like set style, and then you have to like put the style you want. So this is kind of more of like a jQuery type approach. So say you're trying to do something in more of a jQuery fashion, but you want to use Vue. You can do it this way. And you can do this with pretty much this right here is the equivalent in jQuery of these are essentially the same thing. So if you're trying to do things or you're trying to convert something maybe from jQuery to Vue, you can use methods that are very similar. And the beauty, if I remember correctly, is RedM and CFX essentially packages jQuery with the game already. So you can technically use jQuery in Vue. So, you really can kind of pick and choose, what you want, where you're going, all that. Another way you could go about this, so there's one other way, and this is more for like, say you want to change a lot of attributes and maybe you don't want to change each specific style. You're like, hey, I just want it to use this other class, for example. To do that, you would go and you'd say, so like here, we want to do a button class maybe, right? So we'll go class equals, and then whatever class you want, right? So you could say, so this is going to have, well, and you can even pair these, which is nice. So you can say, I want a default class of, well, I guess there's an ID, which would kind of cause some issues. So you get rid of the ID, because technically if you wanted to use this button again somewhere, it's kind of nice to just have it as a class anyway. But so this will be the default, right? So if I go here, dot, it should put it back to how it was. Yep. And so now what I can do is then go, okay, that's the default class, but I want to give it another class, but dynamically. So similar to styles, I can, similar to the styles here, how it's an object that you can kind of, an object that you define what you want in it. So the key being, the attribute that you want to change, the value being, the value that you want to change the key attribute to. So, color red, for example, in this instance. So similar with class, you can pretty much do the same thing. So you could go here. You could even do it inline for the record. But if you have more logic, it's just kind of nice. But this is change style. Oops. Okay, so back to this, sorry. So just trying to leave some comments, or these like little things you guys can look back and go, oh, what was that again? And it'll be here. So you might be like, message button. Yeah, okay, so class. So class, we might want to change this and say, when the message has changed, yeah, okay, so we'll do another one here. So we'll go button style, we'll do class, and the cool thing is you could do, well, actually not class because that's a reserved. So the cool thing is then you could be like, okay, so we have our change button. Let's have diff change button, right? So this will look a little different. So we'll do background color blue, right? And because this is below, right, remember, it'll override. So if I go here and I'm like, this is the class that I want. And what you're going to say here instead is true or false. As in, if it's true, give it this class. If it's false, do not give it this class. And so what we'll do is we'll have the same logic here. So we might have something like this, right? Although, wait. Oh, I'm silly. Here we go. Okay. So you'll see here, right? So we'll have a style change and then we'll have a class change. So let's click and there you go. Look at that. There's the class change. And if we go into an inspector and check that out, you'll see here that it has both classes, right? And remembering that the bottom one will override the changes from the top. And it'll only change what you override. So for this, for example, if I had a background color in here of I don't know, light gray. That's going to change it. Alternatively, if you didn't want this default class to be there, you would get rid of this right here. Whoops. You would get rid of this class, and the beauty of this is you can add multiple classes. So you could say, and have another one here that is change button, and then you'd say showing. And so this right here, this exclamation point is the same in Lua as not. So not showing. So this is saying not. So we're basically saying if it's not showing, have this class. If it's showing, have this one. And you'll see when we do this, it should lose this margin and stuff. Yep. And as you see, it lost it all. Yeah, so there's some of the power of that. So they've shown you how to change style, change classes, add variables to the template, and how to update them, modify, change them. It's really the core, I think, to get anyone kind of going in Vue specifically. Again, the documentations that they have here are very good. I would definitely go through kind of some key things to look at would be, let's see. Yeah, see they also have their own little playground here. But I mean, yeah, I mean, it's kind of the foundation, the base of it. You have your click, your all that. You get some other more intricate ones. So I could do let's see, input view. Okay. So in Vue, if you want to do inputs, it's way easier than jQuery in my opinion, and it's pretty cool. So say you want to input here to change what this text says, for example, right? So you might add a input here, and we're gonna call it's a V model, and this is very specific to Vue. But what it's saying is basically whatever you input into this input, it's gonna update this value. So for example, I could make this straight up message and we wouldn't even need this button. Now remember, you do lose some functionality by doing this, but it does have its use cases. So input viewModel. Let's see what happens. So you see here, it's already says hello world because it's using this same data attribute. And when I update it, it should, it should start updating what's actually there. As you see, I'm literally live as it's going through. Every time you make a change, it's calling this vModel message and it's updating what's there. So if I then went Vorp rules. There you go. You see it's red now. Well, now you have conditional styling based on what's put in an input. It's pretty crazy, right? So that's again some of the beauty of what you can do, and it's just really nice and easy. And so, you know, like you could have a function where you type something in and you click send, and then it goes and checks this, right? So I could have it where instead it has its own message, right? So you go temp message, maybe we call it. And we'll have it empty, and so we'll set the vModel to that. And then we will, on this click, instead, it'll send nothing. And instead what it'll do is when it's clicked, instead of setting it as the message, we will set it as this dot temp message. And so now we have it in steps. So instead of it updating that text live, right? Now we can go Vorp is the best, and then change message, and then there you go. Message is now changed, and you can still freely input in this. So again, just some of the real nice beauties of this, and you can really use this all throughout. You know, it just becomes very useful. And so let's now port this over. Well, actually, I guess first, before we get into NUI and how to interact with Vue and NUI, and then make this display in RedM. Before we do that, I guess, is there any questions, concerns, comments? Okay. If no comments, we'll move on. So I will start migrating this, and you'll see how easy this is to migrate. So if you're messing in here and doing it live and whatever, you can then come back into here, and you can go, so here's my index of my HTML. Remember, it's just what's in this app, this div app. So here's all of this, and then we're going to then grab all this CSS, plop that beauty into this CSS folder. And then now we can grab our Vue JavaScript. And we can go into our app.js, or really whatever you call this. I like to call it app.js. It kind of really signifies that, hey, this is a Vue app, not just like a JavaScript file. But you can really call it whatever you want. Index, Vue, whatever. Maybe don't call it Vue, but you know, whatever you want. And so I copied the wrong thing, I guess. So here we're going to want to replace that. And now technically this should work in RedM. Now again, this is going to pop up after 2 seconds. So as soon as you connect to the server, 2 seconds in, it's going to pop up. So that's we don't want that, right? So what we want is we want to basically have it so that NUI triggers Vue to pop it up. And so I have some examples here already to do that, but we can get kind of further into it. So we'll start on the Lua side just to have a good starting spot. So say you're doing your code in Lua, you're doing your thing, and you have some event that opens it. In our case, we're going to use a command, and we're just going to call it, you know, we're going to call it NUI open. So in this NUI open, we're going to then call this NUI command called NUI send NUI message, and kind of inherently based, just based on its name, right? What it's going to do is it's going to send NUI a message, and specifically with this content or this table, and based on what you have in here, you can then determine how you want to interact. Like, so this is how you send data basically from Lua to your UI. So I could have it say open. Maybe I have some user data in here if you wanted to show some user data or some items or whatever you want. And you can make as many of these as you want and call them. And you can all kind of separate the logic. So starting here, we're going to send a new message of type open. And so we'll go back to our app.js knowing that that's going to get sent. And so here we got to go, okay, how do we listen to it, right? How do we know? And so let me grab some of the old stuff we had just to help me out a bit here. Okay, so how do we do it, right? So as you see here, do we do anything in the mounted right now? We do. Okay. So we actually don't need this mounted anymore, this set timeout. Instead, we're going to have a window .add event listener. So what this is saying is on the browser window or on the RedM NUI window, we're going to add a new event listener. We're going to add something that's constantly looking for an event, and specifically an event called message, which is what NUI is sending, right? Sending a message. So that's what we're listening for. And then on top of that, and this is more just a housekeeping kind of thing, we have a destroyed, which is another lifecycle event. If you remember from Vue, we have the created, mounted, and I forgot destroyed. And this is basically when the app is closed. So whenever you close the UI, whenever you log out of RedM, this gets called. And what this is doing is it's saying from the window, now let's remove this listener. And the reason we do this is it's a web optimization. And it basically just, if you don't have this can technically cause a slight memory leak, meaning that your memory will infinitely grow and eventually could crash. So it's just good practice to have this removed. If you don't have it, it's not the end of the world. If you have one event listener, it generally is okay. In JavaScript, this can be used for a lot of things. I mean, you could do this for a mouse drag event. You could do it for clicking on something if you didn't want to use the @click for some weird reason. All kinds of stuff. There's a bunch of different window and navigation events and all kinds of stuff that you could really leverage this for if you want. But for this demo, it's really for NUI is what we're going to use this for. And then what this is doing, right, is we're going to add an event listener. So we're going to listen for this event. And when this event gets triggered, it's going to trigger this function, which we don't have yet, right? So we're going to make that function. So this function we created is called onMessage with a parameter of event. Now I know here you don't see it passing a parameter, but that's because what we're doing is we're sending this the raw function not being called, and the event listener itself is what's calling it. So the event listener is passing that event. Now with that event, you have your event data. This event data is whatever table you sent through here. So type open or username, Danny, whatever, really whatever data you put in there, it'll kind of pass through. So for this, right, we're going, okay, event data type equals open. So the same type that we passed through. And so when we pass and trigger that, it's going to call this event listener, which is going to call this method. So now that method is being called, we can do something with it. So now we might want to say, instead of that timer, we go this dot show equals true, right? Or showing, I guess, sorry. So now what's going to happen, right, is this whole app will not show on RedM at any point until a script, this script, well, in this case, the command, until that command is called, UI stays closed. And that's all thanks to that little VIF that we had earlier. And so with that, let's open up, well, let's restart, and then let's open up RedM and see how that looks. Although, wait, oops. Okay, so now that's restarted. Let's go into RedM. Oh yeah, a bug in my anti-cheat script. Awesome, 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 awesome. Let's stop that resource for now. Let's try that again. And then after this, and we get this working, we'll do a quick callback. We'll print it out. And then I'll show you guys how to do a quick view transition with the VIF. So you guys have that as an example. And then once we're done with that, we can go over a little jQuery if you guys want. And then that's probably it for the day. But that being said, let's continue and see what this trigger does. Okay, so as you guys can see, the UI did not open. And my Spotify UI decided to pop up. Whatever. So yeah, so the UI did not open. So now let's do NUI open. And there we go. Look at that. There is our UI that we've been working on. And so your next question might be, how do we close it? And it's going to be very similar. Actually, it's going to be the same, but the opposite. So now that we have that, if I do restart, what do we call this? Oh, NUI class. NUI class. So you can see we can do NUI open, it opens. We can do NUI close, and it closed. So there you go. So that's sending your basic commands to the app, to the NUI Vue app. So the question now would be, how do we get data back? And to do that, we do what we call NUI callbacks. So you do a register NUI callback, what you want that callback to be named, and then the data that's passed through as your arguments. So for this case, we're going to have a NUI callback called update. And when it's updated and called from our NUI, it's going to print out the status and the status of the UI. So is it open or closed? So if we go here, this is why I kept this fetch. So we use a library called fetch, which is built into JavaScript. There's other ones like Axios and all that, which give you a little more power, a little more flexibility when it comes to asynchronous versus synchronous calling. But fetch is pretty good. It gets the job done, and you don't have to include any other library. It kind of just works out of the gate. And so we're gonna add that. And doing this, we're gonna teach you another Vue method, or not method, but method, I guess. So we have methods. We have our computed, destroyed, mounted, data, all that, right? So here's another one. Another one called watch. And this one's a really cool one. What watch does is you give it a function, and the function name can be whatever your data is called within data. And what it does is it watches it. So whenever that data changes, it triggers the function. So for example, in this case, we want to watch the showing data variable, and we want to know its current state. So we're going to get data. And so whenever showing changes, it's going to give us that updated change. And so we're going to say, so we're going to do a fetch whenever it changes. So we're posting to our resource, and specifically here to that update, which is what we called our NUI callback. And we're going to send its status, and then we're going to send data, which is the current state of showing. So now that we have that, let's do a refresh. And then let's do a NUI open. And as you'll see right there on the log, status true right here. And if we do it again, let's do close. You'll see now it's false. And so these are ways you can pipe data back. Another example of this, instead of that state, is you could pipe back the message. For example, whenever you change the message, you could have one here that says, update message. Update message, and message equals this.message. So we could have another one here called update message. That's going to do kind of the same thing, right? But message, and it's going to say args dot message. And then the only other thing we have to do is set the NUI focus, which I kind of forgot. So what we're going to want to do is send it a NUI message and then go, what is it? Is NUI focused? No, that's not what I want. What is it called again? Set NUI focus. Okay, so I was right. Set NUI focus. And then we're going to want to go has focus. So, yep, we want to give it focus, and we want to make sure that the mouse can be used. And on the close, it's going to be the opposite. And what this is just saying is, hey, we're opening a NUI menu. Now let the player focus on that menu, and on top of it, let them use their mouse, is what we're saying with this. So I go back here, restart, and we open. You'll see now I have my mouse. And I can go and click. I can say Vorp rules. We'll change message, and you'll see message Vorp rules. And it updated just like it was in the playground we were doing. And then if we do, so we might even want, because we're focused in, we now can't do chat commands. So what we might want then is another button. Maybe that doesn't have this optional class. That says close. And then you might want to say, and @click works for anything, by the way. So I could even do a div if you wanted. And you could say, close, and then close. So boom, and then we'll go here, and we'll make a new method called close. And just like these fetches, we're going to do the same thing. So fetch, we're going to close. Well, actually what we could do, better yet, what we could do is we could actually, instead of having a new function, do it in here. And we could say showing equals false, because that's what we want. And then what we'll do is in the client, if args.status equals false, then we can set the NUI focus. So now let's see what that does, right? So now we're back here, back square one. NUI open. And now you'll see, right? We got a big closed button. We've got our same little attributes. You can click, it'll change it. And then close. Boom, look at that. Now we're closed and back into the game. And if you wanted, so that didn't reset the state, right? So keeping that in mind, everything's still how it was, because you're just hiding and hiding or displaying this. So if you wanted it to clear the state, you might do a in the watcher. So you might say this, right? So that technically inherently is resetting it. So restart it again. You open it. Go, this is cool, man. You change it. We close it. Now if we reopen it again. Boom. Although we didn't reset the other thing. Oops. This dot, what was it? Temp message, I think. Temp equals nothing. Okay. So that should reset it. So now if I do restart, NUI open. Oh, uh-oh, what'd I do? Oh crap, what'd I break? What? Oh yeah, that's cool. We're gonna restart the server and see if it's something with the server. Oh, I think I muted you. Outsider, sorry. What's up? Wait, what do you mean? Oh, gotcha. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I could do that. Yeah, I could do that. Yeah, I can do that right now. Let me just make sure this is working real quick then, and then yeah, I can definitely do that. Okay, there we go. That was just a weird thing. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So if we want to listen to key click events, yeah, let's do that. Okay, so let's do that. Let's go back to our code, and then let's go back to mounted. So kind of like these add event listeners, there's kind of similar ones. So I believe. Okay, so what we're gonna do is go window to add event listener, and I think it's key press is what it is. Key press. And then what we'll do is we'll go on key press. Make a new function. And then, what was it? Console.log event dot, I think it was key, I think is the current one. So if we restart NUI class and then I open it. Why is that not working? Here, actually, we're going to do this in the fiddle just because it's a little easier. Let's go back here. There's two different ones. Just depends. Yeah, there's key press, key up. I think there's also another one as well on top of that, but it just depends when you want to trigger it. Yeah, you could do that as well. That's if you want it on something specific. This is more for like if you're just generally looking for like just a generic key press that isn't related to something specifically. But yeah, like say you're in like the input, you're in this like input and you wanted the enter key to also do the change message, right? Like yeah, you'd be like key press dot enter, I think is what it is. And then you'd be like change message, and then whenever you clicked enter, it would I believe that's how this one works. I haven't done it in a while. Let's try it. Yeah, there you go. So I clicked enter and it changed it to hello. But yeah, so let's say you do like if you want on something specifically. But yeah, if you want to do a general lookup, so you're just like looking for just, hey, was A clicked or whatever. Then it would be this console.log and then the event.key. So then you'd be like, if event.key equals Q. And then or, so this, these two up pipes, I just call them, we call them pipes in programming, but straight lines, I don't know. The two of them means or, and then two ampersands like this means and. So Lua equivalent would be like if key and word, I don't know, whatever, you know what I mean? So kind of the same deal there. So this is saying if the key event is equal to the lowercase q, or if the event key is equal to capital Q, then console.log Q was pressed. So now if we do it, it should, oh, Q press. That's not a thing in that's what I'm saying. It's like, it's just JavaScript. There is no, that is how you say or in JavaScript. If you try doing or, that doesn't work. Yeah. What do you mean? That's what I'm saying. You can't. That's not. Oh, you're saying like why did it? I don't know. yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know why they didn't just. Yeah, it's the same amount of characters too. Yeah, I don't know. There's also like else if and stuff too. But yeah, I don't know why they did that. That's yeah. There's yeah. I mean, I will say yeah. I mean, this and Lua are pretty comparable to be honest. But yeah, Lua's definitely a little easier for sure. But it's just all syntax, so it's just how does each language say the same thing. Yeah, instead of not. Yeah, I know. Yep. That's JavaScript for you. Let's see. Let me add this back in. Okay, let's hop back in. I'll restart the thing. Yeah, that's another shorthand for it as well. As you can do document dot. Yeah. So you could alternatively do so yeah, that also would work too. Same thing. One's just shorthand for the other. But yeah, so here now I'm clicking Q, and it's going Q is pressed. Woohoo! Same thing. I can show. Should also work if I do it this way as well. Oh, actually, it's not working. Weird. Yeah, weird. That's not working for me. I know it does work, but yeah, I would personally stick with the event listener, but yeah, okay. So let's say you listen to keys, and then quickly we can do how to do a transition if you guys, or transition like animation when it shows. So what we'll do is we'll do it in here first, and then I'll transition it over. Actually, yeah. So what you want to do is there's a transition tag that Vue implements. That's specifically for if you're using like a VF or a VShow. Yeah. You just same way you'd style any input. You can style it with CSS or anything like that. Like you just see style the input box. Oh, like
based on the input? Yeah, that's what I showed earlier, right? So if you're like Vorp rules, and it turns red. Well, this isn't doing it right now, but yeah. That's just on focus. But yeah, let's see. So you'd be like, you're talking about like this. Oh my god, dude, red lags so hard. Close. No, I mean there is an outline. Yeah. There's a override you can do. Override input highlights. I'm not sure I understand, but no, I mean you have to. It's programming, right? So you gotta. No, use a class. Or use classes, right? So you do it once and you could reuse it. Like this class change button, I can make another button that uses the same class, and now it's the same looking button. No, yeah, it's all code. Yeah. Oh, that's just material design. That's just a design path. Oh, that's different. That's not an HTML input. That's different. That's a markdown editor. It's That's you need like a library, or you'd have to custom make it. Yeah. I have one. I can help you use if you need one. But yes. There's some libraries I can shoot you that does that for you. Yeah, it'd be nice to do markdown. There is something like that. Yeah, there's a library for it. I can send you a couple. I built a CMS a while back, like Squarespace, for myself. And I was actually, I was gonna show you how to do that at some point, so you could implement that into your like notes and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that you can do for sure. That's easy. That won't be built in. But yeah, like font, I mean you just like this button right where I click it and it. Yeah, so you'd have it click and then it would just set the font and override the style. Yeah. Yeah. If you want like bold, italic, and all that, yeah, that's a library. I can send you at some point. Yeah. Yeah, there's some good ones I can send you at some point. Oh yeah, no worries. What's up? Oh, sorry. Oh, let's just do this in here. Screw this. So we'll go index. So we'll add it above our VF. And then we'll do transition. Okay, and then so that's telling basically Vue that hey, anything in this VF is going to use this transition name. So now if I add, I'm just going to copy someone's because I'm lazy. Style, and then I'll explain it. So here, it's kind of a built-in Vue creates classes based on what you name this transition as.
So this is called slide. So these are all slides dash whatever. So if it was something else, right? So say you want it to like pop up is what you wanted to call it. You'd go here, and instead of slide, it would be called pop up / all these. So we'll slide. What this is doing, we don't need Mozilla because it's all Chrome. We actually only need the actual. So these are all support for other browsers like Mozilla, Safari, Internet Explorer. But cool thing about RedM development is it's all Chrome. So Chrome is very up to date. Cool. We're gonna probably want to change some of this, but that's okay. So then now if I relaunch the server again. All right, let's load my bald head in and see if this transition worked. And it didn't. Okay, great. Oh, why? You should have worked. Oh, I mean, I could just do an animation. I only want these two is what I want. I don't want all this. So like this will change the opacity, which is not what we want. So it'll do like this. Let's try this out. Yeah, you can see on the exit it worked. The open it did not. That's annoying. The way to fix that would be to use an actual animation versus CSS quality changes. See if there's an example so I don't have to. Yeah, here we go. This is what I want. So what we're doing here is we're creating some keyframes. So we're basically saying at 0%, you're going to scale here. At 50%, you're going to do more scale. And then at 100%, you're going to do whatever scale. But instead, we're going to do a little something. We're going to do... And then by 100. Man, real annoying, that's for sure. Top. So I'm going to do a little trick here on how to center things when they're position absolute, which means that their position is whatever you define it as. Transform, translate, 0. So ideally that should still be centered. Or I did it wrong. Actually, let's use NUI DevTools real quick. Make this a little easier on ourselves, you know. There we go. Yeah, so that's what I thought. I just had it reversed. Why? I don't understand. Let's make this a little longer. Let's do a second. We'll do top at 0%. Is negative 900 pixels here. There you go. That's a little laggy. You have to play around with this timing here. So you probably like 0.6 seconds is probably better than a second. That's also going far. This only needs to go like 300. There you go. Here's a little animation. There you go. So obviously if you make it a little quicker, it looks a little better. Yeah, so that's how you do little animations to your transitions. So when something's hidden or showing, you do a quick little transition tag, wrapping parent of whatever your v-if or v showing. Name it what you want, and then in the styles, the name of whatever you call the transition, plus the enter active, leave active, and all this stuff. And then whatever animation you want. That's kind of it, I think. I don't know if there's any questions anyone has. Happy to answer them. I think the next event that I do will probably go more in depth in Vue, and then maybe even more in depth into jQuery and how they compare, like one-to-one. But I think for this intro lesson, I think it's pretty sufficient. I don't know. Let me know if anyone has any questions or anything. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the whole goal of this, like you said, is really to give everyone a good starting spot, and then from there, people can hopefully learn. You can look at some of the scripts I'm doing. You know, if whoever comes out with Vue ones can look at that as well. And Yep. Yep. Yeah, that'll be different for sure. That's why I want to do another event at some point that also goes over. I'm just gonna go over like frameworks specifically, not just like, because this was more like web, HTML, CSS. Yeah. In my opinion, Vue's the good way. Vue's like it's just a lot prettier. It looks a lot better in my opinion. Easier to follow, and yeah, it's just a lot more powerful in the end. But yeah, jQuery is definitely viable. Obviously, people use it. It's been used for a long time. So it's, but yeah. There's a lot of scripts that already use it. Yeah, exactly. That's why I want to do an event next, either next weekend or the one after. I actually have to double check my schedule, but I want to do one where before I start it, I want to build like this Vue app we have here. I want to rebuild this in jQuery, so then people can kind of see the direct difference, and then as I make more scripts, it'll be more Vue, so people can look at that. But yeah, just I don't know, it's just an option if people want. And then yeah, I think I'll probably do another one that goes a bit more into jQuery as well. But yes, Angel, I'll probably post this on YouTube or something just to easily share. Gonna take a while though. I think it's like a 3-4 hour video, so yeah, it's gonna take a bit to upload. But yeah, hopefully this. Oh, sorry. What's up? Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, hopefully this was helpful for you all. And yeah, I'm always free for questions or anything y'all have. We have the HTML CSS or CSS HTML.js channel, so feel free to ask questions in there. I'm always happy to answer questions. Same in the Lua channel. But yeah, hopefully this helped y'all. And yeah, I'll hopefully get another event like this going soon. Yeah, awesome to see y'all. Thanks again.